power vested in me by the state of Connecticut and by the trustees of Sacred Heart University, I confer upon you this 21st day of September in the year 2022 the degree Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa. Congratulations.
It is my pleasure at this time to invite our newest alumnus, Dr. David Brooks, to deliver the convocation address.
Thank you. This is quite unexpected and overwhelmed. I've been awarded a few honorary degrees, and usually it's 5 major donors to the university and then me. I'm there to entertain the 5 major donors. And so then they put your vote and they sort of shove you off the stage. But to be celebrated and honored in this way is unexpected. I'm a little overwhelmed by it. So I'm truly grateful for that. To be in the presence of this beautiful room. I grew up in Lower Manhattan, as has been mentioned, and I went to Grace Church School, and I was in the choir. And because it was Lower Manhattan in New York, the choir was about 30 or 40% Jewish. And so we would sing the hymns, but we wouldn't sing the word Jesus to square it with our religion. And so the volume would drop down, and the hymns would go back. And yet the guy behind me was a crafty fellow, so he came into my life in unexpected ways about 40 years later. I'd like first talking to the students on either side of me, a little old man's advice, and just to say how proud I am and how happy I am that you guys showed up for this. This may be your first convocation, and so you should know there are certain rituals. At the end, you're supposed to tip President Patillo 10 or 20 bucks. Just to show him he's doing a good job. And you students have 2 incredible paths in front of you after you graduate from this. One of them leads to a soulless job as a cog in a corporate machine. The other leads to permanent residence in your parents' basement. I'm here to help you explore these exciting possibilities. The usual cliches of this sort of address are pretty familiar. Follow your passion, take risks, listen to your inner voice, your future is limitless. First, my generation leaves you with a mountain of debt. Then we give you a bunch of crap advice so you'll never pay it off. I'm going to start with practical advice, and this is for everybody, that I recently found in that most academic sources online. And these are some of the practical advice I'm going to start it with. The thing that made you weird as a kid is going to make you wonderful as an adult. Ignore what others might think of you because they aren't thinking of you. If you thought you saw a mouse, you did. And if there's one, there are others. If you're not sure you can carry it all, always take 2 trips. When you're 90% done a big project, finishing up the rest will take another 90%. Just because it's not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. And then especially for the students, one more bit of advice, which is gather 10 of your best friends here at Sacred Heart and form a lifelong giving circle. You get together every year with that group of 10 friends, and you put money in a pot, and you decide where you're going to give the money away every year. And the charity part is nice. But it's a device so you keep lifelong friends from the people you met here. And if you overinvest in your friendships, the ones you make in college, your life will be a lot easier. Because life in your 20s is challenging. So these are useful life hacks that can make you a more effective human being. I'm here to just meditate for a few minutes on our larger destiny as a national community. Every generation faces a central challenge, and ours, I think, is somehow a spiritual and relational and moral challenge all at once. I'll give you a few statistics, but I think it will not be a surprise to you. The number of Americans who say no one knows them well is now 54%. The number of people who say they have no close friends has quadrupled in the last couple of years. The number of people who are depressed is up by about a third. The teenage suicide rate is up by 58%. 26% of Americans have broken with a member of their immediate family. There's just something going on in the relational stew of our society that is suffering and leading to sadness. And that sadness feels to people like an insult. If people feel unseen and invisible, they feel it as an injustice, which it is, and they tend to lash out. And so those sad statistics are matched by mean statistics. Crime rates are rising, reckless driving is rising. The share of Americans who give to charity is down. A generation ago, 2/3 of Americans gave to charity, now it's less than 50%. I have a friend who's a doctor or who's a nurse, and she says she has trouble retaining staff because the patients have become so abusive to her nurses and they leave the profession. I was at a restaurant in New York a couple weeks ago. I ran to the owner. He said every week he has to throw somebody out for cruel and entitled behavior. He said that never used to happen to me. As my colleague from the Wall Street Journal, Peggy Noonan, put it, people are proud of their bitterness now. And to me, the problems in our politics flow from the problems in our souls, which is somehow this spiritual crisis that leads to loneliness and meanness, and shows up most significantly as a drop in social trust. If you ask people in America a generation ago, do you trust your neighbors? 60% said yes. If you ask them today, 30% say yes. And it's highly generational. Boomers still have about 50% level trust. But Millennial and Gen Z have 19% trust levels. And societies really do fall apart when trust declines. Because you can't do deals, you can't do relationships. And so the crisis in our society, some of them are big, but some of them are intimate. The biggest moral challenges we have in front of us are small moral challenges, the daily interactions, the small gestures of kindness or coldness. They're how you treat each other every single hour so other people feel seen, respected, heard. In every crowded room, there are diminishers and illuminators. The diminishers make people feel small and unseen. They don't take time to recognize other people. They stereotype and ignore. The illuminators shine the brightness of their care on people and make them feel bigger, deeper, respected, lit up. And I've tried to nag myself over the last few years, like, be an illuminator. Be one of those people who makes people feel seen, respected, and understood. So how do you do that? Well, in the first place, it takes a knowledge of human nature. In order to see each person in their full complexity, you have to know something about how people act. You have to know something about psychology, culture, and behavior. We learn about those realms by making a lifelong study of literature, history, theater, biography, music, all the humanizing institutions of our society. And these are the most practical things to study, because they teach you what other people are like. And if you don't understand that, you'll probably be miserable and make other people miserable. Second, being an illuminator is about mastering specific social skills. The social skills that people used to learn in churches and synagogues and mosques, but now have to be taught at universities. How do you build a friendship? How do you host a party so everyone feels included? How do you ask for forgiveness, and how do we forgive other people their follies? How do you break up with somebody so they don't feel crushed? How do you sit with someone who's grieving? How do you become a good conversationalist? Listening to others deeply, offering the kinds of comment that make the conversation memorable. Where do you learn these things? I think it's up to those of us who teach to be not just experts in our sphere of expertise, but to also be illuminators and exemplars of how these skills are actually done. Because that's where the pain in our students' lives is being felt. And where do you learn these things? Well, at Sacred Heart, there's an advantage. There's 2,000 years of Catholic social teaching and social thought. I'm not a Catholic, but I found this tradition so valuable and unparalleled in Western intellectual tradition as a source of wisdom and daily practice. not seen as masses, that each person is seen as holy. I tell secular audiences, each person, you have to believe in God or not, that's not my department. But each person has some piece of them that has no size, weight, color, or shape, called their soul, and it gives them infinite value and dignity. That the person behind the cash register has a soul, the person you're getting drunk with at the bar has a soul, and if you treat that person as an infinitely valuable soul, then you probably end up treating them well. The other concept that I say is super handy, if you're going to try to illuminate people, is the concept of made in the image of God. That each person is made as a creator, as God is a creator. And if you treat people as these creators of their worlds, the creators of their consciousness, you'll treat them with the awe and reverence they deserve. C.S. Lewis once said, if you had never met a human being, and you met one, you'd be inclined to worship these creatures, because every individual is so amazing. I get to work sometimes with a guy who you've probably known of, named Yo-Yo Ma. And Yo-Yo is a great musician, but he shines a beam of love on every single person he meets, and he radiates joy as a result of that. And it's like he meets another person, he said, whoa, these creatures are amazing, I met another one and another one. And he lives a life of permanent joy because he sees the infinite soul of each person. And so one of the things that I've come to value, especially about institutions like this one, is there is a moral worldview. And that moral worldview gives the faculty the chance to become applied ethicists, to teach students not only abstractions that they may learn to pass an academic test, but to actually live a noble life. I teach almost every year a book that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, The Long Loneliness by Dorothy Day. And I taught it one year at a seminar with 24 students who were the normal students at the school up in New Haven. At the end, we read 14 books that term. And at the end of the term, the assignment was pick any of the 14 books we read and apply it to a problem in your own life. And of the 24 students, 19 chose The Long Loneliness. I think they loved her emotionality. I think they loved her radical, crystal form life. And I think they're just were so hungry for a realized moral ideal. And I must say, having spent my life admiring her, that model is just so powerful. I once wrote a column about how hard it was to improve people's morals in a classroom. And I got an email from a guy named Dave Jolly, a veterinarian in Oregon. And he said, never forget what a wise person says is the least of that which they give. What gets remembered is how they acted in the smallest of their gestures. Never forget the message of the person. And those words strike home to me, even in the classroom where we do so much more. I remember when Pope Francis became Pope, the whole world rallied to him because the message was the person. And I'll close just with a story of Dorothy Day that I've always found so inspiring. She was, as you know, a beautiful writer. And toward the end of her life, Robert Coles asked her, have you ever thought about writing a memoir? And she said, yeah, I tried once. I got a legal pad. I wrote A Life Remembered on the top. And then I sat there, and I thought of the Lord, and his visit to us all those many centuries ago. And I was just so grateful to have had him on my mind all this time. Just thought that's such a beautiful sentiment that touches you of any faith. And so I'm honored to be in a place that shares that faith, that shares that sentiment, and lifts up that beauty. Thanks so much.